Idaho has 3 times as many wolves as they're supposed to. The goal was 500. They have over 1,500. It's, documented by the biologists and everybody else. It said anything over that 500 mark is going to start to have a negative impact on the habitat, on the ecosystem, and on the ungulate herds.
All right, what is up, everybody? Joined once again by Mr. Brian Lynn from the Sportsmen's Alliance, a fantastic organization that if you're into sporting-related activities, these guys are doing really, really good, positive work to protect the tradition of hunting and all it entails. Brian, we got a bit of a wolf. I can't even say it. Brian, we got a bit of a wolf flare-up lately. Not uncommon. It seems to be kind of a common ebb and flow of wolves are delisted, state agencies hold a hunting season, wolves get relisted, you can't hunt them anymore. In my opinion, there's no logical explanation for that happening. This time in the state of Minnesota, Brian, what the heck is going on?
First of all, great to be here, Mark. Thank you. Yeah, wolves, they're the hot button, right? Like everybody gets fired up, both sides. The animal rights side, it's their poster child. It's their money maker. They make money. They want to keep it listed, and they want to keep the battles going because every time there's a court battle or a movement, they can make money, Our side, of course, is passionate about it because they eat the ungulates. And when you don't have management of an apex predator, they kind of wreak havoc on those herds. So it's the hot button poster child for our industry and for the animal rights activists as well. Boy, it gets deep. It's 20 years that we've been fighting this sucker. At least, and it's deep. So Minnesota is part of the Great Lakes, Western Great Lakes wolf distinct population segment. That includes Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan.
Okay.
Minnesota original goal was supposed to have 1,400 wolves. They're up close to 2,800 now. Michigan and Wisconsin were supposed to have 50 wolves each. That was the idea, 50.
I think we're over that.
A little bit. Michigan is somewhere around 600, 700, 800, somewhere in there, conservative estimates. And Wisconsin is like 1,200 or something, 1,000, somewhere in there. So just a tad bit over. And, we've been fighting this legal battle over this for 20 years. They surpassed these thresholds, 1,450 wolves decades ago. The fight has not been about how many wolves are there and have they met the requirements of the Endangered Species Act for delisting. They've clearly met those thresholds and all the requirements for delisting. We've delisted them 3 times. So, what good lawyers do, and the other side has very good lawyers because they have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on this stuff, unlike most of us in the outdoors industry. They came up and started making salient points and arguments that are in the periphery of this. Kind of what it's boiled down to, we had it opened up there for a couple of years, and you guys had a hunt out there, and then it got shut down again. Well, that ruling came down in, I believe, 2017. And it has more to do with not the thresholds, but the historic range of wolves. They're not recovered throughout their historic range and within the suitable habitat of that historic range. So their argument is, therefore, we shouldn't delist these wolves until they're reestablished everywhere, was kind of one point. And the second point being that if we hunt these wolves and something happens to other distinct populations or those remnant wolves that are outside of identified areas, being the West, the Rocky Mountain West, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and the Great Lakes states, those remnant wolves in between and outside and on the periphery, they're in danger if these core populations take a hit through hunting and natural mortality and whatever else. And the judge said, yeah, you're right. Ordered Fish and Wildlife to go back and figure out how to do this, how to look at historic range, suitable habitat, and how to handle these remnant wolves that are on the periphery and in between the distinct populations as they expand out, which we know they're doing. And so that was kind of the basis of why the hunts took place and then got stopped. Am I making sense?
You are. I'm going to ask a question, and I know I don't have the answer. And if you don't, that's fine as well. Are we doing these same things for other species that aren't recovered throughout their quotation mark historic range?
No.
Okay.
No. They literally pick and choose their battles. The bald eagle, salamanders, all those species that aren't really money makers. They don't care. They're like, yeah, delist. This is great. The Endangered Species Act works. When it comes to wolves and grizzly bears, they're money makers. So they're fighting tooth and nail to keep them listed because they make a lot of money off of those guys.
You're trying to tell me this is a classic case of follow the money?
Yeah, pretty much.
Very interesting. Yeah, like you said, by definition, they are recovered. It's like, in my mind, I'm like, hey, if we did it, everybody, if wolves on the landscape was the goal within a specified threshold, then we did it. And like you said, we did it a long time ago. So like this back and forth with the legal and like semantics and things like that, it just seems a little bit interesting. Let me ask this question, and I've got a little bit of data here, but with this many wolves on the landscape, we'll stick to Minnesota. That's kind of the topic at hand right now. Minnesota has deer populations. They have wolf populations. Large ungulate populations. How are the wolves affecting those populations? Do you know?
I don't have those stats off the top of my head. Anecdotally, you talk to people and they're like, yeah, they're getting hammered. Of course, people in the cities don't see that because they have the suburban deer issues and populations, which has been one effect that they've seen in the wolves in the West, especially, is the deer and elk are moving in response to wolf pressure. They would rather take their chances with humans. So they're coming down out of the mountains and into valleys, into farms, which then creates a human-wildlife conflict as far as depredation of crops. We were just talking, before we came on air about bear hunting in Idaho. And, the small towns out there, Garden Valley and others, it's not uncommon to see the deer and elk moving right into town amongst the houses because the wolves are out there, and it's been fairly well, documented in the media and by studies that even bobcats and mountain lions have moved closer in because of wolves.
Interesting.
The birds are doing that too.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, like, in a lot of areas, they're actually going to find, sanctuary, closer to those human populations, which is interesting. So this is a stat that I printed off the internet. I was trying to do a little bit of research before we jumped on here so I could, have an idea of what's going on. And again, one stat off the internet. I'm quoting it. Don't quote me on it. But it said, I was kind of looking into moose mortality, and it said studies suggest that wolf interaction or that moose interaction with wolf predation has resulted in an average of 4 to 7% population decrease annually, and an indication that wolves are indeed having a significant impact on the natural balance within the Minnesota landscape. While ongoing research continues to investigate how this impact manifests itself further, conservation strategies are needed. And then it was also went on, and I don't have it here, but they were talking about, calf mortality, and that like a substantial amount of moose calves are taken by wolves as well. I thought I had that part printed off. I'm going to look that up. Again, don't quote me, but it was like 2/3 or something like that.
Yeah, and it obviously is going to have an impact. And when you were reading that, I had a thought and then I lost it. But I forgot where I was going to go with that. I when you were in the middle of talking there, I had a great point to make. And
where I was going with it was hey, it's not that this wolf population is like sustainable and stable, but now it's impacting other populations. And, I'm not a biologist, but I don't, losing, up to 7% of your moose population every year doesn't sound sustainable to me.
No, especially when you combine it with the other issues they're having with ticks and habitat and anything else. Kind of the point I was going to make, it's related to that, not Minnesota specific, but in the Rocky Mountains, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho has 3 times as many wolves as they're supposed to. The goal was 500. They have over 1,500. And that's more than that entire 3-state region was supposed to have. And it's in there. It's, documented by the biologists and everybody else. It said anything over that 500 mark is going to start to have a negative impact on the habitat, on the ecosystem, and on the ungulate herds. So the same thing. I mean, Minnesota is there at, twice as much as they're supposed to be. It's going to have a negative impact. It can't not have a negative impact on the ungulate herds and behaviors on top of that.
No, and I've spent some time, I know, in Idaho, and really any wild places are going to be like this. It's tough, remote, difficult to access country, even with an open season. It's going to be difficult to keep these populations in check where there's a optimal balance for the wolves, and their prey.
Yeah, no, they like everybody, if you followed the mainstream media, and this comes from Humane Society of the United States and Center for Biological Diversity, when Idaho and Montana liberalized their seasons last year and opened up trapping year round, on private land, and instituted dogs in some places. And, their goal is to knock it down by 90% because they're, 200% over. They're supposed to be at 500 wolves. They're at 1,500 wolves. So they wanted to bring it back down closer to that mark of 500 where it's supposed to be. Mainstream media jumped on it, went, Idaho, Montana, they're going to kill all their wolves. They're trying to kill 90% of their wolves. It's impossible. It's like almost impossible for us to do that through hunting. We can try to keep them in check, but to even reduce them is hard. I think you have to kill something like a study I read, I think it was 40% of the population just to maintain a stable population.
Right, right.
Is insane, right? But to kill 40% just to maintain status quo. So we have to get ahead of the curve, which recreational hunting and even trapping is difficult. I mean, you talk to trappers out here, and I think coming out of Montana last year, it's a small percentage that took more than one wolf. I'm talking like less than 10% took more than one wolf. So it is just, once they're established and get out there ahead of us, correcting that and bringing back down into balance is almost impossible. But the animal rights movement and groups make a big deal of this. Mainstream media jumps on, and now it's just a devolving argument and discussion that nobody outside of this understands.
It's interesting when you, in my Google searches on this issue, definitely I'd say you find two camps oftentimes, at least in what gets published, and it's interesting to see the spin put on it by one side versus the other. Like one's very, factual, biological, talking like words like sustainable and balance and, ecosystems and wildlife science and management. And then the other side is just pure emotion and spinning it in an emotional manner, is spinning it with like you said, like, Idaho wants to kill 90% of its wolves. It's like, okay, well, where's the rest of the story there? How are those wolves impacting the greater populations that they depend on? That I believe people depend on too. Like when I think of human populations, I include us as part of this ecosystem. Like,
kind of on the landscape.
We're on the landscape. We're mammals. I always say, we have big brains. Bears have big claws. Like everything is on the landscape and has the tools to survive. Because of X, Y, Z. So anyway, I find it's interesting to see, that spin get put on it. And we've had similar conversations like this before, but if those were the messages that I was receiving as like, maybe a person, maybe I'm a non-hunter or, and that's what I'm hearing, those messages, they do sound, you're like, holy mackerel, I can get on board with that. That sounds terrible. Like who would ever think like this? And it's like, back up. What's the rest of the story? Let's look at this from a biological standpoint. But
and that whole Idaho thing, when they liberalized that and all those headlines hit, at the end of the day, after a full season of that, they're exactly in line with where they were the previous years. I think there was like one wolf more taken. Like it's insane. That's how difficult it is. You can have these liberal seasons. You can say, kill them all. You're not going to. Like, they are nature's perfect predator. They're large, they have endurance, they have speed, they have power, and they hunt in cooperative packs. Like, you are not going to do that. And they move. They can go like 30 to 50 miles a day. So they're in one drainage one day, and they're on the other side of the state the other day. They're way far away, so you're not going to be able to keep up with it. It remains the same.
No, I mean, I was in Idaho this year, hunting bears, and I had a wolf tag in my pocket. And when I got out to where we were, and, I was aware that, Idaho had, had pretty, liberal, as far as the season length, method of take, number of wolves you can take in a year, like pretty little. I got out there and I was like, good luck. Like, this is an impossible task. And we keep using Idaho as an example because, I have personal experience there, right? You live pretty, but I think it also, you could take that blueprint and really apply it to any of these states that are over objective with their wolf populations.
Totally. Yeah, it's the same beast, literally, in all the states. Idaho makes it even more challenging because of just the terrain, Idaho, just the terrain of those mountains. But the wolves are the same. They travel the same. They move. They're the same predator. So you can apply the idea, the reproduction, the harvest, the need to kill X amount to keep it in check across the board.
Now, when this popped up, Brian, it appeared to me like, I guess would we call, I guess this would be like legislation that popped up, or like what would this be considered? It was part of a bill, so maybe tell the listeners like what exactly it is, and then also it appeared to just come out of nowhere.
Yeah. So what we were talking about before was all the court cases and how we got to this point. Then this last session, Minnesota House of Representative Pete Fisher, back up from there even, there was a bill. I can't remember, Pete Fisher didn't do this part. I think he was part of it, but there was a contingency of representatives who put forward a legislative bill in the House of Representatives to ban wolf hunting forever, if in case it ever were to be opened. Like it happened in the past and then it was closed by the judge. Well, here's the truth. We'll get to this later, that they're running out of chess moves. Like, we've been playing chess for 20 years and we've kind of got the board where we want it, and we're going to make some moves. they're running out of things to do. They're running out of legal arguments and wiggle room. They know it's coming. So these representatives are trying to take a proactive approach and say, if in case Fish and Wildlife ever removes them from the endangered species list, we're going to make sure Minnesota never has a hunt, even if they do that. So they introduced a bill that would do that. It got shot down. It didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
So that's what happened there. But then Representative Pete Fisher played a little dirty politics. He took that bill and introduced it into the omnibus budget bill, which is the environmental spending bill for the entire state. You're talking the Department of Environment, the Fish and Game, parks, all that, hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of pages thick. He popped in a little paragraph basically saying wolf hunting will never take place. He's deleted some that was already in there and said this will never happen. It passed through the House. Okay. Thankfully, the Senate came up with a different version. So in Minnesota, if they're matching, there's no discussion. Like it doesn't go to a committee and then another committee and then go to a floor vote. If they match, there's no discussion. So here he was trying to sneak this little paragraph into this huge spending bill.
I mean, it seems like, I could be wrong, Brian, but like, it seems like something that could even just get missed.
Oh, totally get missed. And or who is going to hold up this entire budget for one little paragraph?
Okay.
Right? So you got, get missed, don't want to hold the budget up, don't want to do a lot of things. So he snuck it in there and it was like, holy crap, all hands on deck. The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association did a great job, and it did. It took everybody going pedal to the metal, several groups of us advocating like, whoa, making noise for that very reason, so people don't miss it. And it went till it was 11:59 and 59 seconds because he was trying to sneak it in there, bypass any type of democratic talk, discussion, anything, trying to sneak it through. Thankfully, the Senate side of the bill did not have that language in it or have that language struck. So then it had to go to, let's have a discussion about this. Then the two sides had to talk and hammer out and come to a compromise. And when they didn't match and they sat down, that didn't make it in. But it was only because of the pressure of us, Minnesota Deer Hunter Association, several other NGOs and sportsmen's groups screaming and shouting about this that it didn't get in there. So it was dirty politics. It was, slip it through there where it's legal, but is it ethical? Don't know. Depends on which side you're sitting on.
Man, it's always so astounding to me that would even be the goal to do that and want to do that when it's really has no basis in like sound wildlife management or even like the benefit for all wildlife. And I include the wolves in that conversation. Like it makes no sense to be like, oh, this is a good idea.
Yeah, it's when you start delving into this side of things, it becomes a religion. It just takes a true believer, and we're almost a victim of our own success. The North American model has been so successful over the last 75 years or even 50 years, because there's places 50 years ago that deer hunting wasn't great. You would hunt all day or all season, and maybe see a buck. Over the last 50 years or so, we've been so successful that we have an entire generation or even two generations that don't know what it's like not to have wildlife. They've always had it. They think it just happened. And now they believe that, well, if we just leave it alone, nature will balance itself. It does not balance itself. It can't balance itself, especially now with the impact we've had by being on the landscape. There's cities now, there's farms now, there's all this stuff. It's not going to balance itself. And if and when it does, it's a big swings, booms and busts. And it's going to involve a lot of nasty diseases, starvation, everything else.
Yeah, it's not a pretty picture when it gets to that point. That's for sure. Okay, so where is this issue at right now? It sounds like so after this took place, there still is not a wolf season in Minnesota, which is so funny. You know, I mean, I guess it's probably very obvious which side of the fence that I sit on purposely. You know, you got one side that's like, you know, trying to ban wolf hunting indefinitely, and I'm like, why isn't there a wolf season right now? And I feel like I have sound information and to back that up. But where is wolf hunting at in Minnesota now then?
So now we're back to where we were. There is no wolf hunt in Minnesota, Michigan, or Wisconsin because of the court rulings, right? Thankfully, we were able to stop that legislation, both straightforward legislation and the underhanded environmental spending bill. We were able to stop them from putting into place a ban that would prevent it. So that's that. Now, come next session, I guarantee you they're going to be back. They're going to try the same thing again and try to ban wolf hunting if and when wolves get delisted. They'll hammer it, and it took everybody. So just note to everybody in the area, when next July or next January comes around, we're going to have the same fight. They just keep hammering at it because it doesn't cost them anything, right? And so if they win, they've moved the ball. If they don't, they'll just keep trying. So no wolf hunt there. We still have wolf hunts in Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. Now the problem becomes the remnant wolves around, which is what Fish and Wild, or what the courts told Fish and Wildlife to figure out and to take into consideration as they do a census or, you know, make their plans. I can't remember the word that it's called. They've just about wrapped that up. And so now, by the time this airs, we will have filed, Sportsmen's Alliance will have filed 2 petitions that create a path forward for state management of wolves. The first petition will designate and ask Fish and Wildlife to delist wolves in the Great Lakes states, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. Say delist them, they're recovered, they're a distinct population segment. Because in the same court case that put wolves back on the endangered species list in those states, the judge agreed with our argument that you can delist distinct population segments. Humane Society was arguing, no, you can only put them on the list. You can't take them off the list by a distinct population. The judge said, nope, and agreed with our argument. And that's at the basis and the core of this, is that we can delist by distinct population. Let me back up. If you remember, at the end of the Trump administration, he delisted all the wolves in the lower 48, right?
Okay.
So they all came off, and that's why we had the quick hunt in Wisconsin, I believe.
Gotcha, right? Mm-hmm.
That's not a sustainable way forward. As much as we would like it to be, it's not a sustainable way forward because we have these remnant wolves. There's one pack in California, for instance. There's couples spreading out. The one moved down into Colorado, you know. They're going to reintroduce in Colorado. You can't say the wolves are recovered in California because there's one pack. That's not going to stand up to legal scrutiny, right? So the way forward, as we see it, and that we've been arguing for years in court, is to delist by distinct populations where they are recovered. And these are distinct populations. Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana are the Northern Rocky Mountain distinct population. There are boundaries, legal boundaries, which includes 1/3 of Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon, right? So It's not state definitions. It's a population biological definition. And so we are petitioning to delist the wolves in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and kind of the surrounding fringe areas that comprise that biological distinct population. That's the first ask. The second petition we filed will be addressing remnant populations and to create a West Coast remnant population. That and a path forward for those remnants that have spread out from these distinct populations and are taking up residence otherwise. Because the argument is, well, you can't do anything with these recovered wolves until all these other populations, remnant ones, are recovered themselves. Well, they're just going to keep spreading. They'll have a forever argument. So our argument is delist this, create a pathway for remnant populations, and then we can keep the remnant populations as they expand or induced or whatever protected, but we can manage these distinct populations separately. And so that's what we are going to petition, or have petitioned by the time this hits, U.S. Fish and Wildlife to do. And we will see how it goes forward from there.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, a path forward, which is a good thing. And I guess, or thinking about it in, the terms in which you described there with, distinct populations, remnant populations, I imagine over time, populations can be reevaluated and say like, okay, hey, maybe at one time this was a remnant population, now this is a distinct population, and we'll follow that path. Yes?
Exactly. So we'll have the Rocky Mountain distinct population, which was, delisted by Congress. We'll have the Western Great Lakes distinct population. We'll have the remnant populations. These two will be delisted. And then there's those remnant populations expand, stabilize, and grow. We can say this is now a distinct population, petition, whatever, to get this distinct population recognized and then delist that one. It's a piecemeal approach, and it can seem sometimes counterintuitive or the long path, but that's what the court rulings have dictated that they need to consider in order to delist these huge populations. We have to consider the impact and the range of these other populations. So this is a path forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm such a broken record. And number one, thank you for all the work that you guys have done. And I mean, that sounds like a solid plan. And just like anything other than managing these populations, to me, it's just like it's so irresponsible. Like I don't know. It's actually hard for me to fathom that we even have these conversations in the way that we do. But we do, and they're there, and thank goodness that we have folks like you and the Sportsmen's Alliance, leading the charge, and other organizations that are in the fight, doing the work and being in the trenches to find a way forward. Maybe we'll end here. I definitely want to ask if you have any, do you have anything, is there anything else that you have that we didn't cover before I kind of close it out here?
Oh boy. How many rabbit holes do you want to go down?
Oh man.
When it comes to wolves, that's kind of the high level status of where we're at, what's happened in Minnesota in particular, what's happening now with the Great Lakes, Rocky Mountain, and remnant populations, where we're going there. We can always go a deep dive of what's going on in Washington, what's going on in California. It's mind-boggling, and I almost start to feel like I'm wearing a tin hat sometimes, because as you're looking at these pieces from a 30,000-foot view, and you see what's happening with the court battles, with things in Minnesota, and you look at what's happening in Washington with wildlife management, the game commission there, and what they are trying to do, this exact same thing, where you're saying it's mind-boggling. Well, in Washington, you grew up in Washington too, they ended the spring bear hunt. They've created a new game management plan where they're trying to add more protections for things like, coyotes, beavers, and snow geese. They've created a conservation policy where they define conservation, because they use it 14 times in the game plan and then throughout the department, but nobody defined it. So they are defining it. Well, the people defining it are associated with Wildlife for All, Humane Society of the United States, and all these other groups who are trying to break the North American model. And so they're putting in big tent ideas. They're putting in all sorts of stuff. And Washington is the epicenter of this right now. And it is to break the North American model through rewilding and trying to let nature be the counterbalance to instead of hunters. You start me going down that rabbit hole, it gets dark, gets twisted, and you can see it playing out small parts across the country already.
Wow. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm ready.
Time.
I'm not sure if I'm ready for you to take me to that dark place as well right now, Brian. Yeah. But I think we have about 12 other podcasts that we can do here in the future. Boy, like you said, tons of rabbit holes, tons of stuff going on, tons of fights happening simultaneously. I don't know how you guys do it. Speaking of fighting, and this was going to be, at least on this issue for now, at this moment, what I was thinking we might close on, what can a person do? Like you guys, you'll send out an email and, there's a button that you can click, but I always wonder, like, okay, I live in Wisconsin. Do I actually have a voice in Minnesota, or is it mostly residents of that state that need to take accountability and take action there?
This is where it gets tricky, right? Because we do travel as hunters, and so we should have a say. So that's true. We do have a say. And sometimes we want everybody to speak out. Other times, though, if you look at it from the decision maker's point of view, that person who is elected, they don't give two rips what you think. They're just working with their constituents.
Right.
So it can be tough. Sometimes you want to just flood them, right? You want to overwhelm them. Other times you don't want the out-of-state interference because you want them to hear from their constituents. You don't want to drown out or muddle down that voice that actually matters to them. So it kind of depends on the time, the state, the issue, what we need to do, So sometimes we'll just want the state folks to talk if they need to really hear from them. Sometimes we just want to create noise and get to them, and that's where everybody can pitch in. Other times we'll limit the number of out-of-state people who can use our tool just so we don't overwhelm them with out-of-state people that they don't care about. Like from a politician standpoint who's making this decision, he's worried about getting reelected. He doesn't care about you. He wants to talk to his constituents. So it really depends on the situation and what needs to happen, which levers you need to pull, what pressure you need to put on them.
Mm-hmm. I know I commented brought up the Washington thing. Now you're getting me fired up, Brian. I haven't lived there for a long time, but I still care about that place and, the landscapes and the wildlife there and have a very personal attachment to that region. And what's happened there as of late, as far as gun legislation, the canceling of the spring bear season. Man, I've commented more than one time lately on several different things, and probably doesn't matter. Maybe it makes me feel good. But one thing that I did say, a lot of people return home. Right? A lot of people, their careers take them here, there, otherwise, I don't have any immediate plans to get back to Washington, but I know that happens a lot, and I think about that place a lot. And the comment I made is, and I'm supported by a lot of other, facts and things of that nature, was if it goes down this path, this will prevent me from ever moving back to the state that I love. And those are tax dollars that aren't coming back because they've made it a place that I personally can't align with.
I hear you, man. I live 1 mile from Idaho, and I just want to cross that border right now. But this state doesn't care. They literally don't care. I'm hoping the pendulum swings back at some point, both from a larger tax position and everything else down to the game management. It's funny when you talked about submitting comments to the Game Commission. I've talked to a couple of the game commissioners, that were on our side and are gone now and whatever. It's great that everybody comments, but at the end of the day, they don't sit there and count how many. They go, there are a lot of people who feel this way and a lot of people who feel this way. Right now, the way it stands is the other side is up 5-4 under the best of circumstances. 5 anti-hunters who want to reform, change, break. They have 5 commission members, and at best we have 4. It might be 7-2. We don't know. We haven't seen a couple of them vote yet. So they're going to do what they want to do. They really don't care. And the only time that voice and tonnage of people participating makes a difference is when they bring it up. They go, oh, and this happened just the other day. Lorna Smith, who we have a lawsuit against, which should be settled here by the time this airs, or at least heard, tried to say, well, the majority of the people we heard from today support this conservation plan. And Molly Linville said, actually, I was keeping track. It was 15 against and 13 for. Facts don't matter to these people anymore. They're going with soft social sciences. They're muddling the science that does exist. The bear biologist here in Washington quit because she got called up in front of them multiple times, explained the science, and they said it's not good enough. And she was just running her head into the wall. She said, screw it, I quit.
Eternally frustrating.
And now they can put somebody in there that they want. And it's, like I said, it gets deep and dark, and it's really unfortunate. We are in the dark days of wildlife management here in Washington State. And if we don't stop it here, it's going to spread to Colorado and to other blue states, and then it'll infiltrate into the purple states. When it comes to things like apex predators, they don't typically, especially wolves, stay in one state, as we're seeing in Colorado, California, and other states. They spread out and go where the game is and reestablish themselves. So this isn't just about Washington or Colorado or Minnesota having forever bans on wolves. This is about every state surrounding them and 2 or 3 states away, because eventually they're going to get there and the same thing's going to happen.
I mean, you're 100% right. And when these things do go through, that becomes new normal, right? So that next generation, it's all they've ever known. That's how it's always been, when that's not how it's always been. Yeah, I mean, it is a very, 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 very slippery slope. And if it's affecting one state, it's affecting every state. And so like you said, and maybe when we started, talking a little bit about follow the money, I mean, I know several of my good friends who are, Washington natives, love the landscape as much as I do, and they have made that move, right? They've said, you know what, I've just, and it's sad to say, because it's almost like I give up. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you're so demoralized, beaten down, you're like, I give up, I'm out of here, right? And I don't know, maybe enough people do that all of a sudden those taxpayer dollars aren't there. I don't know. It's frustrating, but
I hear you.
Like you said, though, when things do come up, I guess stay vigilant, pay attention to what you guys have going on. I would say support the Sportsmen's Alliance. They are fighting for us as sportsmen. And try to have an impact where you can. Exactly.
And, stay active in your commissions, your state commission meetings. Watch them. Most of them are televised now. Watch and see what's happening, especially if you live in a state like Washington, Colorado, California, Oregon, the blue states or the purple states. Watch and pay attention, or be a part of a local group that keeps tabs on what's happening with regulations through a game commission, because that's where it's shifted. Well, it hasn't shifted. They're still going strong at all the other levels, but they have shifted down and are attacking at the commission level. We've seen Washington, they're trying to change the laws in New Hampshire and Vermont to do that. I think there's like a dozen states. They tried to lower the threshold and barriers for serving on fishing games so they can get anti-hunters in. Washington was perfect because we have 0 requirements. The governor just appoints them, and they get confirmed by the Senate. That's it. And they can serve without being confirmed. So that's where they're trying to open up other states to be like, so anybody can serve. Then they fall onto democracy. We need bikers. We need snow skiers. We need everybody's input. Well, that just waters it down and takes game management out of the hands of hunters and anybody who understands the North American model. So stay vigilant at your commission level as well as your state legislative level. It's hard for a central organization like ourselves to monitor every single game commission, what's going on and what's going on in those subcommittees. You guys need to be the boots on the ground and then alert us if something's happening so we can take action, look into it, make phone calls, or open up a can if we need to. And then, support us if you can. Join, $35. It goes a long way, helps us. I'm not a salesman and I hate talking about money and stuff. But lobbyists and lawyers aren't cheap. And that's where the fight is. And that's how the needle moves. So $35, $100, there's different levels that you can get involved in. If you're a, outdoor company like yourself, there's business partnerships that come with different perks like ads in the magazine and, working together on things. And you can write it off if you're a business. And if you just donate to our C4, you can write that off. The C3, you can't. But as a normal person, it can work as a tax deduction as well at the end of the year. So any help is we'll take it.
I believe it. Well, we appreciate all that stuff, Brian, but I'd say, we mostly appreciate all the hard work and all the fight and effort and staying on top of these issues. So, as hunters, we can, enjoy these activities and pursuits and passions and lifestyles, as they were meant to be. Yeah. So, thank you so much.
You too.
Awesome. All right. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast, everybody. I don't know if you're as fired up as I am right now. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. Again, look at the Sportsmen's Alliance, a great organization. Consider supporting them. They definitely support you as a sportsman. And until next time, happy hunting and shooting. Get out there, stay involved, stay in the fight. Let's move the needle.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.